Hi, everybody. I'm Erin, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us this morning at the Nutrition News Update. I'm a fourth-generation dairy farmer from Gustine, California, about 2 hours from San Francisco, along with my colleague, Jordan Mazur. He's the Director of Nutrition from the San Francisco 49ers, and on behalf of Real California Milk and the California Dairy Farm families, we are here to start the conversation about the growing trend of the intersection of sports nutrition and sustainable food systems. We're going to cover some very interesting topics today and answer some tough questions, as you can see what's on this slide right here. So I hope you guys are ready. Let's get right to it. Here's my take as a California dairy farmer and what I would like you to know about sustainability. Let's talk about the farm. For California dairy farming families, sustainability does not just mean being good enough. It means being the best and continuing a legacy of producing food that is good for people and the planet, and now and for generations to come. I always like to tell people that dairy farming was green before green was cool. The carbon footprint of California dairy farms has actually shrunk 45% over the past 5 decades. It is among the smallest per gallon of milk produced in the world. Here's how California dairy farms got there, using my farm as an example. So let's start with the law of the land, literally. California is the only jurisdiction in the world with a statute for reducing methane by 40% by 2030, and that's including the dairy and livestock. The rest of the world, including the US and 100 other countries, have only pledged to reduce methane by 30%. And California has done this 5 years earlier. California is literally leading the way when it comes to sustainable dairy farming. So on our farm, we have a 975 kilowatt solar farm, and this runs our entire dairy operation. It runs the electricity to cool our milk our cows, light our barns, run irrigation pumps, and also powers employee and family homes. We also have a manure separator and composting machine. And yes, cows produce a lot of poop each day, and we spend a lot of time and effort recycling and reusing all these nutrients. Once all the manure is composted and dried down, the manure is then going to be stacked and stored and used for bedding later in the future for our girls in their stalls. Water recycling. We collect nutrient-rich manure wastewater from cleaning our barns, and all the rainwater is then going to be collected and stored for later use in our lagoon. We can then utilize this nutrient-rich manure water throughout the year and irrigate our crops with it. And this also lessens our use of synthetic fertilizers. And also, the amount of water used to produce a gallon of milk has decreased more than 88% over the past 50 years. And water on a dairy farm is used and reused up to 4 times. Cow care and upcycling. We work closely with a professional dairy nutritionist, and he formulates specific diets for all of our cows using the various feed ingredients that we have on hand. I always like to say that our cows actually eat a healthier and more well-balanced diet than I do. If our cows are not treated and cared for to the highest possible standards, milk production will suffer. Well cared for cows produce lots of nutritious milk. Actually, about 40% of a dairy cow's diet is byproducts from food and fiber production, like almond hulls and grape pumice from wine production. Cows are able then to go and digest a diverse number of feed byproducts that would have otherwise ended up into a landfill. And they're able to create one of the most nutrient-dense foods out there, real milk. This keeps about 15 tons or 1,000 garbage trucks of unusable food byproducts out of landfills every single day. And even cooler than this is that this diet reduces the amount of water needed to grow feed by 1.3 trillion gallons per year. It's a food waste win-win. Cows turn the inedible into edible. And just for us working with our dairy nutritionist, our cows are actually producing 15 pounds more milk than they did 10 years ago. I think that's really incredible because our cows are still eating the same amount of food, but they're producing more milk, which leads us to being more sustainable and also lessens our environmental impact. Renewable biogas. A key strategy for many California dairies is involving capturing methane, produced by cow manure in a digester, and converting this into clean energy for vehicles, homes, and businesses. This benefits the environment, preventing methane from escaping into the atmosphere while also displacing fossil fuels as an energy source. As long as we have cows, consumers have access to some of the most abundant, clean, low carbon, renewable energy source. In addition to producing wholesome milk, California cows will be able to produce 60 million gallons of fuel annually for heavy duty freight trucks, replacing fossil-based diesel with renewable biodiesel, dramatically improving air quality for residents throughout the state. And methane produced by just 5 cows can power a house for a year. And then also methane captured in a digester from just 1 cow annually can produce enough clean, renewable transportation fuel to drive a car across the United States. And at our farm, we are currently underway on our digester project, and we're hopeful to be up and running in 2024. Prosperous communities and the next generation. California dairy delivers so much more than just an important food source. It creates jobs and economic activity in local communities throughout the Golden State. California dairy is actually responsible for roughly 180,000 jobs in California's economy. A healthy dairy community also keeps family farmers thriving. And as dairy farmers, including the next generation, we are a part of these California communities. So sustainability is not just a goal, it's a journey, and it's something that we, of course, become better and better at over time. This is very similar to how an athlete might approach their training, continuously learning and improving, using high quality inputs to perform at their best, just like a dairy cow. Now, I'm not calling athletes cows, but I do consider dairy cows the ultimate athlete. They have their own professional nutritionist, and they design their meals to make sure they get high quality nutrients and vitamins and minerals. They need to stay healthy and thrive and produce lots of high quality milk, all while leading the charge toward a greener future. And with that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Jordan, and he's going to talk about athletes and sustainability.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. I actually, I love that comparison of the cow to athletes, a really good segue, and really unique perspective on a really relevant and relatable topic. So I'm so good to be speaking with you all today on a topic that I'm really passionate about in my personal life, but also professional life. So without wasting too much time, let's get into it, okay? So this right here, there's a lot going on, but it's a conceptual framework of the food system that was developed by the Food and Agriculture Organization. And really the top row there identifies 5 major drivers of the food system changes. So we have environmental, technological, political, socio-cultural, and demographic. And we can see how each of these are linked to various aspects in our food system, and the supply chain, our environment, and consumer behavior. So really this just helps illustrate how complex our food system is and how all of these players are really interconnected. So for the purpose of today's presentation, we're just going to focus on what athletes should consider in this middle section, mainly the consumer behavior and diets, right? These are the areas that they have the most influence on, right? Athletes specifically don't really have much say in the food supply chains or the environments, but really that consumer behavior and the diet. So at the end of the day, all of these stakeholders have an impact on diet. So the diet quantity, quality, diversity, and safety. And of course, diets directly impact nutrition and health outcomes in agriculture. So it's pretty clear, as we all know, that these days consumers are exploring everything they can do to ensure the health of the planet, sustainability. People and communities around the world are looking at this. And really how consumers can approach decisions on food and drink choices are also reflected in today's food trends, right? So by result, a lot of these companies are trying to match the consumer's demand for more sustainable, environmentally conscious food and beverages. So athletes, specifically in my world, are becoming more interested in making food choices that are healthy for themselves and their families, but also with the assurance that their food was grown and raised in a responsibly and sustainable way. And so the next question becomes, why should the athlete care about all this? And I think to start, through the influence of social media, athletes reach a larger community and become role models for entire generations, right? So while athletes may not necessarily be experts in this field, although some are, many do care deeply about sustainability in the environment. So this may come from recognition that a healthy environment is important for their own well-being and athletic performance, or they may just think sustainability is a social issue that they care a lot about. While athletes are increasingly interested in where the food comes from and what's in it and how it's produced, most are actually disconnected from the food system, right? So many have never visited a farm, grown a garden, or really understand the steps that it takes to get the food that they eat, where it comes from farm to table, right? How long, what are the steps to do that? They just see food and they eat it. So when you pair this with the fact that athletes actually require more food and fluids than the average person to meet their nutritional needs, you can start to see why there's a concern and maybe some might question about the environmental impact of their food and drink choices. At the same time, athletes don't really want to sacrifice their ability to be fueled or recover from intense training or competition. But if they read or hear misinformation about how their food is produced or how nutritious it is, they might fear and sometimes avoid foods that are actually really good and nutritious for them. So sustainable nutrition for an athlete means making sure that they pick wholesome, nutrient-dense foods and drinks that are accessible, affordable, and also culturally relevant, while also preserving environmental resources and supporting local communities. So today, research and policy experts on this topic are thinking about sustainable system in four main ways, right? The first one is economic, so is it affordable? The second area is social, so is it culturally and society, if there's cultural and societal value to it. 3 is environmental and sustainability, right? Is it planet friendly? And 4, the health and nutrition, so is it nutrient dense? So as part of a system, the 4 domains are interconnected, but right now they're evaluated using different metrics and measures, which not always have been thoroughly defined. To date, most research conducted is focused on 2 main domains, the health and nutrition, and also the environmental impact of food production. And this research has mainly been conducted predominantly in these high-income countries. So there's a significant gap in research, collaboration, and integration in this area, especially when it comes to the social and economic domains of sustainability. These domains have also not been adapted to speak specifically to the environment, social culture, or demographic drivers of the athlete. So what I'm going to do is go into my take on those 4 domains of sustainability and what it means for the athlete, okay? So let's start with the environment or planet friendly. We know athletes rely on higher protein intakes to meet their energy and nutrition demands, and those often come from animal sources. And although animal-based foods have a higher environmental impact than plant-based foods, the impact varies by product. Eggs, dairy, pork, and poultry, which tend to have a lower impact than meats and fisheries. So only thing about environmental impact of proteins has a significant limitation, right? Athletes don't only rely on single foods, right? They don't only rely on meat and protein. Their diets are composed of many foods. Secondly, we want to look at society. So the contribution of foods and food systems to social identity, community, tradition, and culture may also be considered because sustainable diets need to be healthy, affordable, and also socially acceptable. Athletes come from diverse cultural, racial, and ethnic backgrounds and practice diverse eating patterns. Athletes have a different religious taste, personal preference, allergies, and intolerance. So there's a wide variety of challenges there. Sustainable food and beverage choices have to consider all this, or it not be practical for that athlete to implement, which may then impact their food choices and the ability to meet their energy and nutrition needs. Athletes often pay attention to the trends too when it comes to food, right? This is very common. Being a part of a team or an organization can help put a focus on specific pattern of eating that considers social and cultural ways. As more people around them, right, the team adopt and focus on the social identity, the community values, tradition, and culture in context of what foods might benefit from performance and recovery the most. And then we'll talk about economics, right? Affordability. If an athlete can't afford or access a certain food or drink, how are they supposed to use it to better their performance and really, again, better the planet? So athletes may be more educated and aware of the health and nutrition benefits of eating to fuel performance on a budget, which then could result in better awareness of how to choose foods that both optimize performance and are better for the planet. And then lastly, we have to look at nutrition health, right? Is it nutrient dense? An athlete's diet should be rooted in whole food nutrition to meet their nutrient needs, right? These foods include fresh produce and proteins and less on processed and prepackaged foods. So athletes should enjoy these foods, be able to prepare, eat them, and then be able to incorporate them easily into their daily routines and around activity. So with all that said, there are very few foods that check all 4 boxes of those 4 domains that I just mentioned as sustainable food choices for athletes and active people. So real California milk and dairy products do. And so let's talk about why. So from an environmental standpoint, right, over the past 50 years, California dairy farmers have reduced the environmental footprint of each glass of milk. So we're seeing 45% less use of greenhouse gases, 89% less land use, 88% less water, and then less pesticides, less fossil fuels, and less energy. From a societal standpoint, protein choices can often be specific to an athlete and is often really driven by taste preference, accessibility, familiarity, religion, and culture. So for those athletes who may want to follow a plant-based diet, milk and dairy products are still a great option for a great high-quality protein source. From an economic standpoint, Real California milk and dairy products meet the requirements of the affordability test, right? They provide dietary calcium as a main ingredient at the lowest cost by far compared to calcium cost per penny from all other major food groups. So milk and dairy products also provide just really high quality protein. There's one of the most affordable sources of also critical, very important macro and micronutrients for athletes. And then health and nutrition, right? Milk and dairy products, including yogurt, provide relatively more nutrients and calories, and therefore we meet that nutrient density test. So based on this, milk and dairy products can be described as nutrient dense, affordable, and appealing for athletes. Modern farming practices have also lowered the impact of natural resources on the environment. So milk products have low energy density and are relatively inexpensive, and they have a high nutritional value. So Real California milk and dairy products are some of the most sustainable nutrient dense foods athletes can purchase because there's little waste in the production process. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between nutrient dense foods, functional foods, and beverage choices that an athlete has to make for the environment. If we compare a variety of beverages solely by looking at their raw emissions and carbon dioxide equivalents, as you see on this chart, we see that the highest greenhouse gas emissions drinks are associated with red wine, followed by soft drinks, and then milk. So if an athlete was only concerned about consuming beverages that were low on greenhouse gases, then this figure would suggest that they should only be consuming mineral water, soy drink, or oat drink. But athletes really need to make nutrient dense food and drink choices. So the nutrient density score then looks at the total nutrition package offered by each food or drink. So foods with a greater diversity and quantity of essential nutrients will have a higher nutrition density score. So what if an athlete were to select the highest food or drink that provides the highest nutrient density for the lowest environmental cost? Those foods with a greater ratio will then have a greater nutrient package given the environmental impact of producing those foods. So after implementation of this ratio, milk sorts itself to the top, followed by orange juice and then soy drink. So although it's often thought that it can't be done, we see here that nutrient quality, nutrient density, and sustainability can go hand in hand when making food choices or beverage choices for the athlete. So encouraging nutrient dense foods and drink choices from both plant-based and dairy sources can help close those nutrient gaps that still exist among athletes, believe it or not. So including some of the most underconsumed nutrients that athletes need: calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, and zinc. Real milk is one of those nutrient dense food choices that contain 13 essential nutrients in each serving. So in fact, it might be the #1 food source that provides 3 of the 4 underconsumed nutrients of public health concern that's identified by the dietary guidelines for Americans. So we have calcium, vitamin D, and potassium. All those are provided by real milk. So in addition to the nutrient dense milk, in addition, nutrient dense milk is the primary ingredient for yogurt, right, which provides 7 essential nutrients, and also cheese, which provides 6 essential nutrients per serving. So with all this value, milk serves as really a one-stop shop for help athletes meet the 3 R's of recovery. So rebuild, refuel, and rehydrate. Those are the 3 main areas that I focus on with my athletes. Another important thing here to consider for the athlete is the synergistic role that their food and beverage choices play together. Today, the focus is shifting towards the impact of whole foods as opposed to individual nutrients. We see a lot of times in research that it focuses on a single nutrient, right? But there's this emerging concept as the food matrix, right? So that looks at the physical structure of foods and the nutrients within it that may impact digestion, absorption, health, beyond the impact of those individual nutrients. Real milk and dairy are more than the sum of their parts in isolation. So there's really a lot more to it when consuming real milk. Simple strategies such as reducing or eliminating entire food groups or categories to achieve a more sustainable eating patterns are likely to have unintended consequences, especially for athletes. So For example, there was some research conducted at Virginia Tech University. So the removal of dairy cows would have a minimal impact on the greenhouse gases. So emissions would only be reduced by less than 1%, so 0.7%. So milk production only contributes to 1.3% of all US greenhouse gases emissions. So by comparison, as an industry, the US accounts for 28% of greenhouse. The transportation only accounts for 28% of the greenhouse gas emissions. The entire farming sector only accounts for just 7 to 8% of California's total greenhouse gases and 10% for the entire US. Transportation, industrial, and electrical account for more than 80% of greenhouse gases, and our homes, business, and other account for another 12. So in theory, by just removing dairy cows from the US would actually reduce, would only reduce the availability of essential micronutrients that we mentioned earlier, the calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, B12, and choline. And these are very important nutrients for athletes that they struggle to get to begin with. So by just eliminating cows to reduce emissions, you also eliminate this great source of accessible, affordable, and nutrient-dense foods for athletes and active individuals. And research has found that it's really not that easy to get all those essential nutrients that are found in real milk from any other single food source. Animal and plant food should also not be thought of as competing entities, but rather as synergistic foods sources that provide different complementary nutrition, socioeconomic, and environmental benefits. Real milk is also beneficial to flexitarian diets. So vegetarian eating patterns, dairy foods complement plants as this high quality protein source that provides some of those nutrients that that might be lacking in certain vegetarian and vegan diets, including the vitamin B12, calcium, iron, and zinc. So let's look at what other foods other behaviors that athletes can take to reducing their environmental impact. Okay. So one thing is meal planning. It sounds basic, but having athletes plan ahead to use to what they're planning to buy is one of the most effective ways to cut down on food waste. Athletes can pick one day of the week to go shopping and meal prep for the week. Athletes can plan ahead and buy in bulk. So reducing the amount of time that they go to the grocery store by instead of 3 or 4 times a week, they go in once a week and meal prep and use their freezer to store some of that food. So they're buying in bulk. Eat seasonally and locally sourced foods. I think that shopping locally is fun. Going to local farmers markets is a way to also support the community, helps keep their dollars where they live. When they purchase foods that were grown locally, it also cuts down on the shipping costs to then bring those foods and produce to the grocery store. So it really helps them follow a more sustainable pattern of eating. I think the athletes can also use their freezer. So batch cook staple foods and recovery meals, kind of the same idea as meal prepping. So there's certain items that are on sale, or they can batch cook things like soup, lasagna, or casseroles. They can make a couple batches, freeze one meal, or refrigerate one for later. And also a fun fact going through all this, you can actually, I'm not sure if you knew this, but you can actually freeze milk. So you can freeze milk for up to 3 months. Cheese can also be kept another 6 to 9 months when frozen in an airtight container. And so that's a great way to extend the shelf life of milk and keep it for a little bit longer. So hydrate and eat with reusable, recyclable containers whenever possible, and that helps minimize the need for single-use containers. So instead of purchasing all those water bottles or beverage bottles, athletes can use refillable bottles throughout the day, carry it around with them, things like water to hydrate, but also in the case of recovery, they can use real milk or chocolate milk as a recovery beverage. Reusable food containers are also an excellent way for transporting meals and snacks throughout the day. So this is actually a performance snack pack that I created that uses this reusable aluminum container. Athletes need a little bit more fuel throughout the day, so this is a great way to pack some food, throw it in your backpack and take it with you to fuel up in between meals. Healthier diets are also often associated with a greater amount of food waste, so minimizing food waste by packing and storing leftovers is critical. After finishing meals, they can immediately package up these leftovers in a reheating fashion so that they can heat it up for lunch the next day. And lastly, let's talk about food storage. Athletes should not only store certain foods like milk or products in the refrigerator door. This has been shown. This has the most temperature fluctuations, allowing for a quicker expiration. Also, dairy products that are sold in cartons, like sour cream and cottage cheese, yogurt, or ice cream, can actually be stored upside down to prevent mold and ice crystal formation. So we can also encourage our athletes and active individuals to start the conversation that supports sustainability. So tried and true, good conversation starters are meal planning, the portion control, food safety, and eating on the budget aren't just important ways for athletes to manage their health and food dollars. Those strategies also are going to be helping to reduce the carbon footprint as well. And then I want to just touch briefly on things that we're doing here with the 49ers when it comes to sustainability. Within our training facility and cafeteria, provide bins for our athletes and coaches to deposit food scraps that can be composted. We provide plenty of recycling containers around the facility. We provide reusable containers. We use a lot of protein bottles, protein shaker bottles that we reuse. And then we also donate a large portion of our leftovers to youth and adult homeless organizations around the Bay Area instead of throwing that food away in a landfill. Additionally, our Levi Stadium, where we play our home games, is lowering the greenhouse gas impacts from concessions through a 4,000 square foot rooftop farm that's on top of our stadium, and educating kids on sustainability through our STEAM education field trip program that serves over 60,000 Bay Area kids. And the stadium concession is also focused on working with local suppliers to fulfill its farm to table menus inside the stadium, and will be composting and recycling with the greatest extent as possible. And then throughout all these efforts, it has achieved a LEED Gold certification for operations and maintenance of an existing building, making it the first ever NFL stadium to be LEED Gold certified. So that's really cool. So to wrap up, I know we're running out of time, but let's go over a few of our takeaways. So I want to leave you with four key things here, right? So athletes and active individuals should begin to understand that sustainable sports nutrition encompasses more than awareness of what athletes are putting in their body. It also is about decreasing waste to limit impact on the environment as well. Rather than labeling foods as good or bad, we can instead look at the broader spectrum of sustainable nutrition that considers how people produce, access, prepare, and ultimately consume nutritious foods that have a direct impact on the athlete's health and performance. Athletes and active individuals should consider those four domains of sustainable food system: the environmental, economic, social, and health nutrition, when it comes to navigating decisions around food choices and meal planning to meet their needs. California real milk and dairy products, by choosing those check all four boxes as a food that fits sustainable eating patterns for athletes and active individuals at all levels. Dairy is a powerful nutrient package, which again provides 13 essential nutrients like protein, calcium, and vitamin D. It's also friendly to both the flexitarian and vegetarian eating patterns, and contributes to nutrients that athletes can struggle to consume, but are important for supporting their performance and recovery. Real California milk really serve as a one-stop shop to help athletes recover and fuel. And then fourth, we need to realize that from the farm to your fridge, the dairy industry is taking steps to reduce food waste and greenhouse gas emissions. So with that, and on behalf of Aaron and Real California Milk, we hope that you enjoyed the session today. Look for Real California Milk mailer and more information on California's dairy sustainability journey in the coming weeks. And I think now we're going to leave it open to a few questions. Hopefully we've saved a little bit of time. But I appreciate you all listening and paying attention to this talk.
Jordan and Aaron, thanks so much. That was awesome. I have a major question. Is Jimmy G our man for next year?
That's so funny. I was at Expo West. I don't know if you're familiar with Expo West, and every time I wear my 49ers gear, that's the number one question. They want to know about that, or make me relive our loss to the Rams in the championship game. But my lips are sealed. I can't really share too much of that information.
Okay. We'll come back to that. So Aaron, some great questions came up about some of the sustainability items that you mentioned in your presentation. One is from Courtney Leva, and she's asking, can you explain the manure water concept? Is this something that we're going to see more of in the future, and not other farmers trying this?
So it's actually commonplace on every single dairy farm. So like every single farmer that I know, they really recycle and reuse all their manure water. So every single drop of water on the farm from even washing, of course, our milk barn that we clean. All the water is collected and stored into our lagoon, and it's used for irrigation for our crops. We don't have to actually order as much water. And so we're always recycling and reusing water on our farm. So it's commonplace mostly on all farms throughout California and the United States.
Great, thank you. And Jordan, question for you. What is grown on the rooftop at Levi Stadium?
So that's a great question. This is my 6th year now, and when I went up there when I first started, they grow a ton of. So think about produce that they can use in the concession. So a lot of lettuce. We use a lot of herbs, a lot of spices, a lot of garlic. We use tomatoes, things that we can serve in our concessions and our booths. The suites there for the stadium. Things have shifted a little bit during COVID, and we're growing a little bit more foods that require a little less hands-on work. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff that produce, herbs, spices, and things that we can use inside, in the stadium.
And about how the methane is converted into fuel.
So that's a very interesting question. So it's all done by actually anaerobic fermentation. So all the manure goes into one centralized point. It goes into the digester, and that has to have no oxygen in it. And then microbes actually break down the manure. And from that breakdown, it makes the gas. And that gas then is collected, and that's used for all the fuel, transportation, electricity, and all that kind of stuff. But I can get you some more information on that if you would like.